This is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association, located at 1601 East 18th Street, Suite 200F. What's up, Kansas City? It's Tiffany Berry, and today my guest is Mr. Brandon Ellington. Mr. Ellington is the Democratic member of the Missouri House of Representatives. He is representing District 22. Mr. Ellington, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for asking. First, we want to go ahead and get into you're actually on your second term. You actually defeated both opponents by over 80%. Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. And first thing first, I understand you're active in several committees. One of those being the Special Committee on Urban Issues. Would you like to elaborate on that for us?
No, definitely. Urban Issues is a committee that I actually had to negotiate with the Speaker of the House last year to re-get the committee. I'm the chair of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus, and one of the reasons that we organized and dealt with the Speaker last year to get the committee back is we have to have an official state committee that can not only subpoena people, bring people up there, but also run different pieces of legislation that would overtly affect inner city areas such as education, the criminal justice system, economic development, etc.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. And now I did my research on you, and I understand that you actually you've been dedicated to this since you were young. I understand as young as 19. So what's mainly your motivation? What keeps you inspired to work for Kansas City, or even for the people for that part?
No, that's extremely easy. Poverty and isolation. I grew up off of Prospect, so I grew up in the off the 5900 block of Prospect, off 35th and Jackson, and off 40th and Prospect. So growing up, not only was I isolated economically, we was politically isolated. So it was a lot of different things that happened to me coming up. And then when I went to college, I actually had textbook documentation of how not only we were studied in the inner city, but how there had to be a perpetuation of institutional isolation. So in politics, I got involved in politics because politics is the rules of engagement in America, and it's the only way that people can have freedom and liberation. And freedom and liberation is not synonymous; they're two different things. So in my district, I have white folks, black folks, Latinos, but it doesn't matter the color of the skin because we're all in suffrage. So growing up in suffrage, I have an intimate understanding about it, and again, that's the reason why I got in politics, because it's the only way to deconstruct institutionalized barriers.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that, we as a people, we need someone in leadership that we can relate to, who can relate to us for that matter. So thank you on behalf of Kansas City. Also, another thing that's exciting is that you're actually working on another bill to actually assist inmates upon release, upon obtaining work. And that's very important, especially with, when they're getting out and they need something steady. Can you elaborate on that bill and what pushed you to?
Now, I'm actually glad you asked that question, because now we're talking about institutionalized perpetuation of not only racial divide, but we see this accelerated in society. And what I mean by that, if you look at the numbers in the state of Missouri, after 3 years, you have a jump in the recidivism rate to 54.4%. So that's extremely high. And then when you look at the allocation of inmates once they're released, they're either going to East St. Louis or they're coming to East Kansas City. So in East Kansas City, we have economic isolation. There's no jobs there, there's no companies, there's no manufacturing. It's very poor quality educational arenas over there, no community connectors. So therefore, on a local level, you have an area that's ripe for crime, and you're going to have high crime rate. From the institutional aspect, you have a whole bunch of so-called minorities getting locked up for nonviolent offenses in the state of Missouri. It's over 70% so-called minorities locked up for drug offenses. Now I'm going to tell you what one of the Republicans told me when I had the bill in committee. He told me, Ellington, this is a good bill, but you're not thinking. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not thinking? He said, you're thinking about how it affects Kansas City. You're thinking about how it's going to affect the east side of St. Louis. You're not thinking about how it's going to affect Boonville. Because, see, in my district, we have penitentiaries. And it's beneficial for us in my community to take people from your area and lock them up in the penitentiary, because these are our major manufacturers. Now, he wasn't saying this to be racist. He wasn't saying this to be funny. He was saying this to prove the point of institutional racism and institutional biasness. Because the way the criminal justice system is set up right now is beneficial for everybody outside of the inner city. Now, when we talk about institutions, we have to deconstruct this. If we have a penitentiary that's meant to rehabilitate, because that's what the word means, then we have to restore people to useful nature. So if you have people in here that doesn't have job skills,
Right.
or doesn't have literacy skills, or have mental problems, that should be evaluated and that should be assessed. That way when they're released, they can assimilate. If not, you're going to have what we see here after 3 years, people committing crimes.
Yes.
And the data shows that people, once they're released, they're not instantly re-engaged in the criminal activity. It's after 3 years. And then when we look at the social connotation to that, and we look at the areas, we see, well, this individual try to find a job. There's no jobs around him. He has no money to get a bus. He has to provide for his family, or whatever the financial burden is, and then they commit a crime.
Right.
And that's institutionalized, and that's something that has to stop, because when we talk about corrections, we can either give people the resources that they need to re-assimilate, and then we can have a safer society, or we can have pockets of inner city areas that is extremely violent, extremely high crime rate because of the lack of amenities and the lack of realistic, viable economic opportunities.
Absolutely.
Had to get all that in.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm glad you did it. We got a chance to hear that. And one other thing that connects with that, you're actually also trying to pass a bill that actually banishes grand juries,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Can you tell us about that as well? I think
Yes.
that's another great thing.
What goes to construction? When we talk about grand juries, the average citizen doesn't understand what a grand jury is for. A grand jury is a prosecutor's court. It's not a court proceeding. So a judge does not intervene in the grand jury. A defense attorney cannot present any evidence to a grand jury. Only the prosecutor can present evidence, and if a prosecutor wants a conviction in the grand jury, 9 times out of 10 that prosecutor is going to get it. So when we look at what happened in St. Louis and we look at McCullough was borderline prosecutor misconduct. He allowed witnesses that he knew was not testifying truthfully to testify, and he said that he did this because he wanted all the information to come out. Well, by doing that, he tainted the evidence pool, and he also tainted the process. And when we talk about convictions, a prosecutor does not need a grand jury to try somebody. It's just a operational tool for a prosecutor. Now, the prosecution says they use grand juries because they don't want to make all evidence available if they don't have enough to go through with a full-fledged case. But that's what we have other court proceedings for. Like, we have other court proceedings that do the exact same thing. So a grand jury is not a necessity, and the grand jury, again, is only a prosecutor's tool. So it's not a necessity that we have it, and I believe it's an antiquated, outdated tool. And if you talk to a lot of judges, they have issues with the way the grand jury goes because they understand it's not a court proceeding.
Yeah, and that's something, probably, the normal person probably wouldn't understand. So I'm glad.
Think about it. Let's say that you didn't get convicted. I used the lacrosse team at Duke. The lacrosse team at Duke went through a grand jury process, so they was immediately branded rapists. Now, when it came out that they didn't rape them, it's too late now,
Right.
because the process has already been tainted. You already look like you're a criminal. If a prosecutor brings somebody through a grand jury and they get a grand jury conviction, and then they lose the case, because that can happen too. But the perception when you go in front of that jury and you say he was already convicted by the grand jury, you're already thinking he's guilty.
Yes.
Because you're not aware of the information that the grand jury received. And again, the grand jury only receives information that the prosecutor wants to give. And the prosecutor is not obligated to disclose anything. Yeah, so he can keep evidence that he know will vindicate this person, etc. He can keep that quiet. Now, you can't do that in a civil proceeding. Can't do it at all.
Well, we thank you for doing what you're doing. Now, another thing that connects with that, and the reason why I'm asking about all these bills, because I believe that there's something that the people need to hear, the people need to know, and something that we're pushing for as well. As far as the bill that you're trying to pass, as far as having the law enforcement wear body cams. So does your motivation from that come from the Michael Brown incident, or just all around just to make sure that they're protected and we're protected?
Both the dualistic protections, I actually filed the bill the year before Mike Brown got killed.
Okay.
So had this law taken effect, it would have been no questioning what happened.
Right.
It would have been no question if Mike Brown rushed a police officer or if the police officer shot him with his hands up on his knees. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When we talk about the dualistic protection that the video and audio equipment brings, it's realistic. Now, it doesn't stop bad actors, but what it does is it gives somebody a right to go back in there. It gives somebody evidence to go back in there if their rights have been violated. And on the reverse end, it gives the police officers protection too. If they haven't done anything wrong, then you have the video and the audio equipment. The problem is we have a system that's designed to oppress people and not to protect people. At the state this year, as opposed to passing a bill to require video and audio equipment or anything like that, out of the House we passed a bill that said that law enforcement would not be required to turn over video and audio tape recordings to the state. What kind of sense does that make?
Right.
When we have documented cases of people getting killed, we have video evidence of people getting killed on video.
I agree.
With no type of justification through the courts, and we can't pass the video and audio equipment because of what? Well, I believe it's who it affects. I stood up on the floor and I read a list of individuals that was killed by the police. I had another representative that stood up and said that I couldn't read that because they didn't know what I was talking about. And they try to act like I was making up these names of people that had been murdered over the last year. This is the problem that we have. People only learn from observation and participation. So in growing up in the inner city, the areas that I grew up in, I watched a lot of overtly abusive police tactics. So that's where the ideal for the video and audio came from. Now it became sensationalized this year with Mike Brown, and you had other representatives and senators that filed similar legislation, but they didn't file it the year before. They filed it because of the media attention. I'm a little different. I filed it because I believe in the realistic, intrinsic value that it brings to people of having documented evidence of police harassment.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Now, what can we, as a community, do to support you and to, I guess, push you forward to make sure these things happen? What can we do as a community?
It's a lot. It's all information. I teach free political classes, free legal classes. The legal classes is the second Tuesday of every month at the Mary Kelly Center, 6 to 8 p.m. The political classes are held there too. But the more information people get out there, the better off I am, because as a representative, I represent the will of the people, not the reverse. Not the people represent my will. So the more that we can come together and the more that we can lobby, the more that people can call up there to the state and talk about these bills to different representatives, different senators, and talk about the need that they have for them to vote yes on this type of legislation goes a long way. People showing up to town hall meetings goes a long way. But what I've been trying to work on is getting people engaged. We started a political action committee last year for the exact same reason, to get people engaged and have a viable political vehicle in which we can have long-term political change, which would trickle down to long-term social change.
Awesome. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get his information before we wrap up. But I just want to know, is there anything that you want the public to know? Anything that you want to get out there?
Yes. Now I got to do a plug. It's shameless. Saturday at 12 p.m., 95.3, we have the What's Real radio program where we talk about politics, current events, and we have financial news in there. The second Tuesday of every month, we have the legal classes. The legal classes are being sponsored by the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus and the Jackson County Bar Association. Then we have a Community Appreciation Activist Day, which will be October the 21st at the Multipurpose Center, 6 to 8 p.m. And I got a lot more going, but that's what I can remember right now.
That's fine. I just wanna say on behalf of Kansas City, thank you for everything that you're doing. Like I said before, it takes a lot for us to accept leadership. From everything that's been going on, and for you to relate to us, and for us to be able to look at you and say, you know what, he's for us. We want to say thank you.
No, thank you.
And as far as all the bills that's going on, we thank you for pushing that forward. We thank you for working for Kansas City and the community. And if there's anything else that you would like to say, we ask that you do so. Let them know where they can contact you.
You can contact me at brandon.ellington@house.mo.gov. That's my state account. Send me anything that you have, complaints, issues, etc. I also do a weekly newsletter from the Capitol. If you email me, I would definitely make sure you get the weekly update. And via the weekly update, we have community news in there too. So we try to highlight different things that's happening in the community. So it's an extremely informational paper. So please contact me at brandon.ellington@house.mo.gov.
Awesome. Now, Kansas City, you've heard it from Mr. Brandon Ellington himself. He's doing great things for us and great things for the community. Make sure that you reach out and join in those programs that he has to offer. And don't forget to tune in for more videos at whatsupkansascity.net. And make sure that, always remember that if you don't grind, you won't shine. And if you don't work, you won't eat. And make it make sense. And you all have a great day.
I'm IFBB Bikini Pro Kat Williams, and when I'm not working out in the gym, I'm searching the web on Cascade Media and What's Up Kansas City. So make sure you check them out.